So on today's episode of the Creative Lens, we're going to be talking about getting started with making content online and the journey which Wade and myself took in order to developing our skills and extending our business's reach through the platform of YouTube. So let's jump in and kick things off. So Wade, how are you doing today, man?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, man, pretty good. It's pretty cold and chilly down here in Brisbane at the moment. It was a frosty 7 degrees this morning.
I don't know what our actual official degrees are here, but yeah, it feels about the same. A little bit chilly. I'm all rugged up.
It's fresh. All right, dude. Well, look, it's a bit of an interesting one with this when you're talking about getting started on making content, particularly for YouTube, because there's so many things you have to take into account. There's like scripting or preparing your content or your video. It's getting ready to make sure it's recorded correctly, so it's shot. Your video, your audio is recorded correctly, the editing process, your thumbnail design. There's so much that goes into creating content online these days. And I think I can understand how people get so overwhelmed with getting started.
Yeah, I agree. But the good news is if you can really take an approach to sit back and go, cool, what do I need to know? There's a few concepts straight away that are pretty universal. Now, obviously, YouTube has specific small, finer details, but I mean, every platform has its format that you have to learn how to obviously technically upload and that kind of thing. And then of course the delivery, like at Instagram, there's the visuals and what's going to grab people's eyes. And on YouTube, it's, the hook and how you present it. And obviously podcasting, there's how you present that. Like, you just have to look at, obviously, the format and what works and how to cut out some of the fluff and the noise so that you get a really direct sort of like communication, don't you? Like, it's pretty much a concept across the board that you have to pick up some skills and figure out how the communication is best delivered.
Well, when you were starting out with your channel, what were some of the things that you found to be the biggest obstacles when you were getting going?
My confidence was probably the first one. I definitely, because I transitioned from blogging over to video, the same problems were there in the sense that I always tried to be kind of anonymous at the start. And then eventually I was like, no, I'll try and get my face on there, which is funny because my channel's primarily faceless now in the sense that people know my name and I talk and there's my voice. But trying to just be totally comfortable with putting myself out there was the biggest hurdle because that affects your performance in what you're doing pretty dramatically.
Yeah, 100%, dude. Like, because I'd like to think of myself as a reasonably confident person in that regard, but not in terms of putting myself out there or like I'm the shit, so to speak, but in terms of, okay, I'm going to put time into something. I might be aware it's not going to be the greatest in the beginning, but I have confidence in applying processes to things, which eventually you build skills and get results. And that gives me a lot of, I guess it eases a lot of concerns potentially in the beginning when you're starting something new. But that was definitely something for me because I remember thinking, what's the reception going to be like? Are people going to slam you? Are they going to love you? And are they going to ignore you?
And that's having a bit of faith in yourself makes a big difference when you're trying to face something like that.
Yeah, because that's the you can understand how people get I guess they lose encouragement and lose enthusiasm for something where, say their skill set's at a 3 in terms of content making, but they go about, they put their best effort forward in making a video and the reception is it's crickets. Like no one's watching, no one's listening.
Yeah, which is funny because you feel like what happens if all these people see it and then they don't? So it's funny, and confidence comes. I heard something the other day. I couldn't tell you the exact quote, but it's something along the lines of you build confidence by building a skill set. It's not like confidence is something you can just take off a shelf. In regards to having faith in yourself, you have to try and challenge yourself for different things to know, hey, I usually end up okay. And in this case, you just have to start. You just have to start somewhere and build on it as you go.
Yeah, I think that's what's that John Danaher idea on confidence is like it comes from, like you said, the skill sets of like knowing you can do something in an environment. And I think the best advice I could give to anyone who's looking to start, whether it's an instrument or another hobby or even want to get into content creating online, is you have to embrace that beginner.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah. When you're a beginner, it's okay to make mistakes. If you expect yourself to make mistakes, it'll be okay.
Because one of the things I really struggled with which was actually quite surprising for me in the beginning, was actually presenting on camera. And because by the time I started my YouTube channel, I would have done 10, 12, 15,000 classes of actually working with people directly related to what I was talking about online. But I remember those first video that I tried to shoot, man. I sat down there and I'm literally beep, you talk for 3 seconds. Oh, that was crap. You just you're judging yourself and everything you're saying really harshly, and it's creating it's almost like you're just cluttering your mind with all this stuff, which is not jamming a screwdriver into gears in a bike or something. That's how I think about it in my head.
Especially because when you're not confident, you're battling those thoughts whilst trying to do the job. But once you're confident and relaxed, you can focus entirely on what you're doing. So I found that one of the biggest things for me, aside from just getting started, was I spent a period just watching videos or consuming the content of the platform that I was trying to get good at. Because it's one thing to consume the content as a viewer, but it's another thing as a creator to go, so what are they doing? How are they doing it? And then you start to, at the start, you almost try to replicate people a little bit. But I think bits and pieces of that suit you stay behind, and eventually you drop the bits that don't. So I think it's okay at the start to kind of look at people and replicate.
Yeah, man. I did that a lot. Because what I found, and this is a trick that a lot of people use when you're working with artists in the studio, is sometimes a singer will be, they won't have confidence in how they're phrasing something in a recording session or a particular line. And one trick you can actually get them to do is, okay, so let's just say Mick Jagger, just as some random artist, okay? Imagine this was Mick Jagger phrasing this line or this phrase you're about to sing. And what it does, it just allows, the person subconsciously takes on the confidence of that person, and they get out of their own way and they phrase in a completely more confident manner. The amount of times I've seen that work when you're working with artists in the studio is ridiculous.
I've heard that about a lot of famous musicians actually, where they find that a certain character that they kind of portray at some stage makes them popular. And so they start to be that character. And then over time, they almost turn into that character. I think one I heard was Tupac, that he kind of took on a little bit of a gangster persona, and then he played it up and then almost slowly kind of turned into that person over time. I mean, I could be wrong. I'm not a diehard Tupac, but I'm a fan. But when I heard that, I thought that's funny, because I never pictured, you look at his early work, he never didn't seem like a gangster, but he kind of slowly went in that direction over time because I think it was popular.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's interesting, dude. But that's something I definitely found myself imitating people from a presenting sense, just because it allowed me just to get out of my way that little bit to start taking steps forward. Because I think the thing is, it's almost, you've got to take it from the perspective is you've just got to take steps forward. Embrace being a beginner. It's not going to be great, but after you've done X amount of videos and you've gone through the process X amount of times, and you just try and improve that one little thing as you go, and look back at it, forward momentum is so important in developing skills in this regard.
And as you're going, it's hard to notice the change until you. This is one thing. It's always good to review your work, especially your old work, because you might not even realize how much better you're getting. I remember when I finally got to the point where I was talking to the camera and shooting, because when I first started, to give you a bit of a perspective, I was doing just screen recordings. And all the screen recordings on YouTube were, you'd see this blank screen and the guy would be like, "Hi guys, today we're going to learn how to do this thing." And so I was like, oh, I could do that. I did it better than that. But over time, I realized I could do it even better. But at some point, I started trying to present as a person. So shooting me talking to the camera, because I thought that's more engaging. And going back after a while, I would watch a video I'd done that I had recorded and gone, yeah, I like the delivery of that video. And then I would go back and watch one from 6 months earlier and realize I thought that was good, but I can see all the holes in it compared to what I'm currently doing. Just by doing it, I got better and I didn't even notice. And then eventually I stopped shooting myself and I tried to apply a lot of that presentation to my screen recordings, which is probably why they do well. But yeah, like sometimes you got to go back and just look at your old work and compare it to your new work, and you'll see how far you've come, and that'll kind of like motivate you to keep going.
Yeah, that's because it's sometimes when you're making incremental progress, it's hard to pick it up, isn't it? A lot of the time. One thing I've found useful as well, just to sort of unpick yourself or get yourself unstuck from obstacles when you're moving forward, is I found like there was a point where, particularly when I was presenting long pieces of information, that allowed me to sort of really cut away the fat from some of the things I was saying and stop yourself from repeating yourself sometimes, was actually using a teleprompter. I don't use it as much at the moment, but there was a point where I would literally sit down and do my intros, outros, and I would do all my talking stuff just off the teleprompter. But what I've found with that, I've noticed recently, is I found like the presentation of it was very one-dimensional, and I was just almost like just trying to get through the lines and like say it as quickly as possible because you think the content has to be delivered as sharp and as punchy as possible. But I found like I started to feel it was a bit one-dimensional in its presentation and the way it was given, and with the last lot of videos I've been doing recently is I've using, I guess, editing and B-roll and things to sort of glue it over, but trying to talk more, like you have your points in mind that you want to get, but almost trying to formulate it more a little bit off the cuff and hopefully a little bit more authentic and original, as opposed to like, you know how people, when you present, because I found with the teleprompter, I was kind of talking like I was presenting an ad, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean, definitely. It's funny you say that too, because I used to do that where I dot point videos because, I've gotten to the point, if I'm presenting face to the camera, I do dot points. And you do get to a point where you mentally, now a lot of professionals will still script their videos, but I find that I like just doing the dot points because I know how to go, cool, I want to introduce a point. I want to say, why this is a point, how you can benefit from it, and then like summarize to finish and then move on. So I've got like a mental structure. And on top of that, you clean up your speech. Like if we had started this podcast 2 years ago, we would probably be saying things like, what's the, you'd be umming and ahhing, but now it's like, you know how to start just talking confidently. You're like, I'm just going to fluently say this sentence, and you clean up your speech, and therefore you're more direct and less boring and more engaging just by default from practice. Yeah,
and I think when you're editing yourself too all of the time, that's really useful because there's things when you're presenting you don't necessarily pick up on, but when you're editing your own content, you see, why am I saying that all the time? Or you just pick up those patterns.
100%. Yeah, you reflected the mirror back on yourself. I found that, and just to sort of like touch, if anyone is doing another form of content creation, like I found that when it came to blogging, writing these long articles, it's like, no, people don't want to read from start to finish. So you started doing things like adding in subtitles so they could scan, and images and things like that. And then your delivery changes and you get more direct within those sections. And so your communication improves written. And it's the same with YouTube or like any kind of presentation where you're sort of like going, cool, this is what we're talking about now. Boom, boom, boom. You move into that point, you get through it, and then you move on to the next point, you get through, or whatever, however it is, whatever style of content you're presenting. It's the same with Instagram too. Like I found with carousels, trying to tease something so it forces them to go to one side, and then, finding ways to create hooks at the start because you want people to go, oh, how does that work? And then you answer the question and lead into another question. And there's so many little things that when you try to formalize it, it sounds like a lot of really complicated pieces to memorize, but you just pick them up over time and they just become like the way you communicate when you're in that content creation mode.
Yeah, I think, and that's a really important point. Like you said, just pick them up over time because you can get caught up on trying to make a perfect video straight away. And obviously try and do your best work, but do your best work within a reason. So like you're not spending 2 months on making a 5-minute video when you could probably just, you're going to get better learning results by just sort of putting in a solid effort for a reasonable amount of time, just making 4 videos or 5 videos or 8 videos in that 2-month period, as opposed to one perfect video that might just bomb. So that's the trick, I think, with this stuff, is getting your repetitions on going through the process. But the bottom line with all of this stuff is you have to find, and this happens over time, and it's okay to imitate people. It's okay as long as you're getting started and you're getting forward momentum. You're just taking those forward steps, but you want to feel like you're communicating authentically.
Yeah.
And I think that's when you're going to resonate with people the best, whether it's making your art or it doesn't matter what you do, you've got to be authentic with it. Because if you I think people have like a bullshit detector where they see someone who's trying to be something they're not.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about starting a new Mr. Beast channel for myself, actually, because I see the subscribers and I think, oh, I want a piece of that pie, That's just not me.
Yeah, and I think like you look at anyone who's doing well and they're generally just doing themselves.
Exactly. Well, you can always present much more authentically and clearly when you're being yourself. And on top of that, if you're talking about a topic you know about, it's not difficult for you to remember the facts because you just know them. You don't have to memorize them. You don't have to go, okay, what are the things I'm going to say today? If you know it, and you can just talk about it. Like, anytime, if I ever ask you any question about how to play guitar, you will be able to just start talking about it. And you could probably talk for 45 minutes if I gave you enough of a question. Because you know about it.
Potentially. But like, it's better to give someone 10 seconds of wisdom that they can take away than 45 minutes of a lecture to try and remember, though, isn't it?
And that's the skill, isn't it? Taking the 45-minute rant you give to your friends, turning it into a 15-second piece of content for strangers.
Yeah, you got to give it the gold. But so moving on to the next stage. So there's a few tips. Well, if we try to sum up this one, you can script your content. You could potentially use a teleprompter. You could look at imitating other people to help you just get that confidence presenting. But the most important thing is just get your repetitions in. Just embrace that being a beginner and just try and get as many reps in as possible, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So with, I said then. Oh my God. Should we start again?
Yeah, scrap this whole episode.
Yeah. So with the, in terms of the production audio and film side of things, did you have how did your content evolve with that?
So yeah, when I look at the screen recording stuff, I realized, because I literally watched a video once. It was a guy teaching people how to get better at YouTube, which is another point, like get yourself educated as well, because you get better ideas of what to look out for. But I remember him saying, he was talking about reviewing a video, and at the start of the video, someone riding a bike, and it was like a GoPro footage. And he was trying to assess why it was a high-performing video. And he said, well, straight away, there's a lot of movement. There's something happening. And I thought, well, man, like I said before, those guys that start the video were like, hi, guys, we're going to do this. There's just a blank screen sitting there. And I realized, like, man, it's not necessarily about movement. It's just about, is something happening that people go, whoa, what's happening here? So for me, I started just doing recordings. But one of the things I tried to do was just get something happening pretty early. And I think eventually we realized within the first 10 seconds, you need a bunch of things happening. But this is even earlier than that, where I just tried to zoom in on certain areas, just zoom in and out whenever I was doing screen recordings. And when I was talking, things like going, how do I break it up? One, there's B-roll. One, my delivery, like we're talking, needs to improve, but also little things like zooming in. Like if I'm emphasizing a point, I would go, and the point is this. And then in the editor, I would just zoom in like 10, 20% or something like that. So it caught me zoomed in for that 1 second, emphasizing that point, zoom back out. And what's also handy about that is if you happen to say something like or you can actually cut that out and it just can come across quite naturally. But yeah, little visual things that sort of pop you in and out. That was one of the things I looked for. But I think one mistake I'm going on a fair bit about this, but one mistake people make, which I also made, was I didn't pick up on that early enough. One of the first things that got me was my footage doesn't look as clear as this YouTuber. So I spent too much time just trying to get my footage to look a certain way, when the most important thing is, if you're talking, is the audio and the engagement. You can have grainy footage, and if it's edited well, it'll probably perform better. It won't look as good, but focusing too much on having all the right gear was one of the issues I had. But
yeah. It's an interesting thing with guitar, like, because people get so gear focused, where it's like they just want to get the gear because they think the gear is going to let them play like Hendrix or whoever they want to emulate. But I think with this sort of stuff, you just want to make sure, like, you can record really good audio. I mean, good video on a phone these days. Like, some of the mobiles, like, records really, really well. I think it's important. One thing I noticed with using multiple cameras, like, you just want to make sure that if you're going to use multiple cameras, like switching between mobile or different cameras, you just want to make sure in your editing you've got your color grades all set up so it's not obvious that you're using a different camera when you're chopping between footage. Because you just want to make sure that you've recorded your audio cleanly and you've got your camera and your lighting in check, I think, before you even start editing. If you can get those things right, as in the space looks good, like it's clear, the audio quality is reasonable, like that's one of those things where it makes your editing life so much easier. And I think a lot of people overlook that. They go for the flashy stuff. It's just keep it simple. Get your audio and your video clean, and then you've got something you can work with in edit. But you mentioned B-roll a second ago. Where can you, because obviously B-roll is like uber expensive. Like, I've been in that situation where you've signed up for video subscriptions to services I won't mention, and it's not worth it. You might get 4 or 5 bits of footage in relation to what you're talking about, but it's quite limited in its utility, like as an ongoing service. So where do you get B-roll, or where can you hunt around and get B-roll that doesn't cost you like $150 a piece?
So 2 things. One is, if you're looking just straight up for free B-roll, you can go to pexels.com, which is PEXELS.com. They have a bunch of free video you can download for commercial use, high quality too. But the other thing too is the best type of B-roll could actually be authentically you as well. So even just going, well, okay, with me, it's quite easy that I talk about a lot of computer or technology type stuff on my channel. So I can take B-roll of me at the computer. I can take B-roll of me going, oh yeah, awesome. Or looking angry, or, looking at emotions, or looking at activities, or even just footage of you doing mundane tasks that you can quickly switch between. If you can't find good B-roll, but you have the ability just to set up your phone or camera somewhere and record yourself doing some of the things that you would normally go through you can either be for one video or globally for your channel. Having that to draw on is really good and authentic. And then your video doesn't look almost like everyone else's. 'Cause I use a lot of Pexels videos anyway. I got some of my own B-roll as well, but sometimes I notice it in other people's videos and it kind of like, oh, I know where that came from. But yeah, it doesn't do any damage, but it's just a factor.
Yeah, Pexels is a great resource. One thing I started messing around with recently is with your B-roll footage, actually in terms of VFX, like if you don't want to have to be constantly coughing up for visual effects plugins for your editing software, is getting a bit of B-roll and then dropping it into Canva, in the video function in Canva, and then you can put they have little pop-up like graphics and things you can put over the top of it, which is a great free resource for people to get after and use.
Yeah, that's it. Because that's one of the things about growing too, is there's a financial barrier. Not everyone has the money to spend on, cool, I'm going to go sign up for After Effects and then I've got to learn After Effects, and like that's a much more complicated program. So yeah, having those access to those free tools that do the basic tasks like that, extremely handy. Or even like one thing I've actually been meaning to do a tutorial on it for like a year, is if you don't have a good video editor, go find CapCut. That's got a bunch of effects and things in it as well, and that's free. That's another awesome free resource. So
yeah. I think you can trying to keep your overheads and your material or the things that you signed up for to an absolute bare minimum is so important, particularly when you're not in the beginning, where you're not having the income or the revenue coming in off your content.
Absolutely, yeah. Because you shouldn't be focusing too much on getting all the right. Here's a thought. When you were talking about like people getting caught up with the gear, playing guitar, it's the same when you're talking about buying programs, buying software. You might find that you go, hey, I'm actually more interested in this other form of content. And then you spent $3,000 on a camera and a microphone and lighting and all this stuff. It's like, if you can find ways to be more resourceful at the start, make sure that what's working is working, then you can move on to spending that money. Because I think what a lot of people do is they focus on the tools because when people see the work involved in learning a skill or doing something, quite often they're intimidated by it, and therefore they look for a tool to replace the effort.
Yeah. It's much better and much more important as a creative to be effective with less. Like, put it this way, if I'm recording, or I've worked in a lot of very expensive recording studios over the years, like multi-million-dollar facilities. Most of them are out of business now.
Because people can do this stuff at home now.
Yeah,
not to a degree,
but the thing is, like, for example, there was a studio, which was a private studio I did a bit of work out of, quite close to where I live, like an hour's drive. And this guy pumped $3 or $4 million into this studio. He's never going to recoup that money. Never. As though, on the other hand, my friend Marley, who's got a studio, like top studio, like does a lot of editing for Netflix and really high-end TV programs, very accomplished artist, one of the best engineers I've ever worked with, like in the world, this guy. His ears are ridiculous. You walk into his studio, he's got an amazing space, but he's got very minimal gear. But every bit of kit in that studio, he knows how to use like a ninja. And he's built that up little piece by little piece over like 20 years. And this guy can do anything with a fraction of the gear. You walk into like a multi-million-dollar studio and look at it and go, okay, wow, look, all this stuff looks incredible, but the engineers who are signed on to do the sessions don't know how to use like 70% of it.
That's such a good point, because a lot of people, like, I've always looked at when there's a barrier to entry for something, that's a good thing, because that means not anyone can walk in and do it. So, like, with some people, it's skill. Some people do it with machinery. Like, I remember when I worked at a print shop for about a decade or so, the machinery was the barrier, because you had hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of printing equipment. But if you didn't know how to use it all, then, or you know, how to get by and do certain things without just deferring to a piece of equipment, the second you lose your footing in that business, you have nothing. Whereas with the skill and resourcefulness, if you build that first, if your house burns down or anything happens where you have to start again and you have no money, then you can start again because you built the skill set. And chances are you'll get straight back to where you were really quickly. But if you rely too much on buying things and spending money, when you run out of money, because money can go up and down for a lot of people, but what you learn sits in your head. If you keep doing it, it'll stay there. It's a skill you have for life.
Yeah, and that's learning how to build your skill sets consistently is going to allow you to make better content, more streamlined over the long run, man. One quick little technical thing I've picked up, which was a massive thing for me, is if you're doing and you do voiceovers after you've recorded, like making sure you use the same microphone for everything. Because I've got several mics, obviously, with my audio background and work there where, like, for example, this podcast mic, if I try and do a voiceover using that, like the EQ range on that and the frequencies that it lets through as opposed to my lav mic, which I'm using to present for my tutorials and my content, is completely different. And it's such a pain to try and like EQ it. I'll start trying to manipulate the signal. I'm just like, forget this. I'm just going to go re-record it with the lav mic.
It's funny you mention that, because I went through the exact same thing. And when I actually presented my videos, when I was talking to the camera, I used a lav mic, and it was like a completely different type of video to when I was presenting a piece of software, because I didn't want them to sound different, like from like cut to cut. And just to sort of further emphasize the skill and content side of things, I had a corner set up that looked very nice where I was presenting, but I'm actually accepting the fact that it's okay for me to have a small microphone in front of me and be at my desk, as long as I just have the back looking relatively decent because I can be engaging enough and talk about interesting enough information that actually just recording me at the desk is just as good as getting everything set up and looking super spruced in the background, because I'm relying too much on my scene. Don't get me wrong, you don't want to completely ignore the scene. You want it to look good, but I don't have it to have this whole next level thing where I'm talking to the camera. I can just set up a nice backdrop with some good lighting in that where I am, and even have a little camera in front of my face and talk. And the little bits and pieces I've done so far seem to have worked out fine. So it just goes to show you your skill in being resourceful and being able to set something up in that area means that I get to use the same mic now, because the same mic I use for that is now the same mic I use for my screen recordings. And that was a major reason. It was actually the microphone. Also, just not having to set up everything every time when I have a microphone hooked up that does a better job anyway.
Well, that's one thing. You want to reduce friction with your process as well, and this comes down to resourcefulness, because if you want to be making a lot of content, you want to be able to have as little friction to that process as possible. So for me, in my studio, I've got like my little corner with my computer set up. I've got all my audio gear plugged into that, my microphones, all my keyboards, like music software. I've got my film editing software set up there. All my teaching resources are there as well for all the classes and content. I've got the other section of my studio, which has got all my cameras and everything set up. My lighting for the content is permanently in place. So literally I just flick everything on. You just try and reduce as much friction as possible to the process of making content. And with lighting and things like that, I think it happens over time. It's like, don't try and go for the biggest, best thing straight away, because that's going to find you spending a lot of dollars. Like, just maybe little tweaks over time with like a little bit of lighting here, or like some of my lights are like proper film lights. Some of them are just light bulbs with cellophane, like with rubber bands over the top to sort of as gels, just to create a different color. Like, it's not expensive stuff. I might have had an old lamp laying around, and I've just, you find little ways to build a set which looks really good, because I get complimented on my setup all the time, particularly online, like the lighting and all that sort of stuff. And that's happened over years. That just hasn't happened just straight away. So just, again, being patient and letting it evolve and letting your skills evolve allows you to just, not spend a ton of money on stuff which you're not getting the most use out of.
It's funny, obviously, if you're listening to this, you can't see what I see. But Ryan and I have a video feed while we're talking, and there's a big light sitting right behind his head, so I know exactly what he's saying. It's all set up, ready to go. That's one thing I noticed about you, and I actually remember speaking to you about this a couple months ago, was you'll be filming in a room, and the room's nice, but it's not like a massive studio or anything. You literally have like a colored light on the wall to make the space interesting. A bit of audio gear around, because you're talking about guitars, and it works. It's simple. It's a light with obviously some lighting at the front. Like, you haven't gone and spent all this money on a crazy backdrop or anything. You've literally got a room gone, cool, I turn these lights off, I turn these colored lights on, and boom, you transform that space, like you said, at the flick of a switch. So it's sometimes, like I said, that resourcefulness, I keep saying resourceful. I feel like I say it way too many times in this.
Well, it's you want to be, because being resourceful means that you have more skills, and you're saving resources by having resourcefulness.
Yeah, it's the skill. Yeah. The other thing too is like those skills, as you get more and more understanding of what you're doing, it's easier to be resourceful, because you go, oh, that's actually not important. I don't need this. You can do the whole 80-20 rule, the whole 20% of the effort that produces 80% of the results. You can go, I tidy up that 20%. And that's a lot more efficient than trying to perfect everything, which everyone tries to do at the start. But as you gain understanding, you start going, cool, this isn't important. I used to do these massive edits in my videos where I did all this fancy stuff and like images popping up, and then like I'd get footage and pop images into and I realized that people don't care. They came to get the tutorial. So I started going, well, I can still have some images pop up, but maybe I just don't do the massive complicated things of footage with images being embedded into the footage and things like that, and saved a ton of time because it wasn't important.
Yeah, it's finding that minimum effective dose to that sort of stuff. And the other thing too with cameras, like angles is everything. Like, because I don't have I make the most of my space. Like, I haven't got a tiny room, but I remember I was looking at one point building a designated space at my house, and some of the quotes were like 20 grand to build a designated space. And I thought about it and just went, actually, I don't need that. I don't need to spend 20 grand. I could just do this and do that and make a few little tweaks here and there, and I've got everything working together. And just trying to take that real, what do I need to be able to do? What are the minimum tools to allow me to produce high quality content?
And I think a lot of people could learn from that, especially because a lot of content creators are doing this because they don't want to keep doing what they're doing. They want to transition. They want to make more money doing something they actually enjoy because maybe they're not getting paid enough or they hate their job. So by going, well, the minimum entry is I need to build a studio in my backyard and have $50,000 worth of lights and a crew, means you're never going to do it. But if you go, well, how can I make this happen in a spare room? Or, it's a way you're more likely to succeed, especially if you can build your audience and get there with those. Then when you eventually get to a point where you got that momentum, moving on to something more serious, if you decide to do that when you can afford to do it, that's when you're able to go, cool, this is just something that makes the process a little bit better, a little bit smoother because I can afford to do it. But if you're stretching, it's a big risk that you're taking too early.
Well, you're potentially just killing your venture before it gets started by just over capitalizing on things.
Yeah. The other thing too is, sorry, just kicked my chair. The other thing too is using if you want to know what works, it's not like you have to just have theories. You can go into your analytics. You can see which videos perform the best, analyze those videos, compare them to the ones that don't. You can go into your video analytics and see your audience retention for those videos, see where they're leaving. Like I remember about a year or two ago, we were looking at some of your videos, and then I went and looked at my videos and noticed the same thing. At the introductions, people were just leaving like straight away. But then when you started teaching, it picked up a little bit, and we realized, we need to cut out a bunch of stuff out of the intros. And that's just an example, but that's when you realize part of the skill is being able to, you can increase your skill by getting very direct feedback as to what you're doing, what's working and what's not working. And so actually understanding analytics, I think, is a skill as well, because then you more directly improve your skill set as to what's more effective. And of course, no one is going to look at that and go, that's a nice studio, I'm going to keep watching the video. Because how many times have you sat down to watch a movie that is obviously got a massive budget, but it's complete trash? You just go, I can't watch this. Or while you're watching it, you're thinking, I can't wait to stop watching this.
Yeah, I've seen a few movies like that, man.
And man, how many people watch the Blair Witch Project? Don't get me wrong, I don't think it's a great movie, but it wasn't exactly high budget.
It was compelling.
Absolutely.
To say the least, man. But all right, well, let's try and wrap this up and put a neat little bow on it by summarizing some of the points. So first thing we spoke about is embrace that beginner mindset. And moral of the story, you just got to start making content and just being willing to take step forward. So, that can be through imitating people or scripting out your content like really finely, using a teleprompter, and just, I guess, experiment with different variations of delivering that content, whether it's screen recordings or presenting. And with enough repetitions, just try and find something which is authentic for yourself. Do you want to add anything, Wade?
Yeah, I would say the next step would be then, obviously, like I love this word, resourcefulness. Being resourceful and try not to throw money at your problems, because you want to build the skill set. You don't want to just throw money at your problem, at what's not working. You want to build the skill set, and that's like that beginner mindset, like I said, putting in the hours and building the skill set. Don't throw money at things, or otherwise you kind of rob yourself of those lessons.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess that's the thing, like you said. So with that in mind, just try and keep your audio and your visual production very clean and minimal, and just slowly build your skill sets to make the most out of that. Because when you're dealing with audio, the only thing that matters is you record it cleanly. And then you can do whatever you want with it if it's recorded cleanly. If it's recorded poorly, you're pushing it uphill. And I think audio, when you're making content, it's exactly the same. So build those skills and give yourself a position, or put yourself in a position to actually make good quality content by getting all that stuff recorded cleanly so you can edit. You've got a product to work with. And I guess with editing, it's the same thing. Just slowly add skills, like be patient, add one little thing at a time. Like you were saying, pencil in times where you go back and have a look at your content, see what's up, check your analytics, where can you improve, what's working, what's not. So many things. But you just got to have that long-term mindset.
Yep. And my only other thing I would say is, and this is to summarize, even though it's going to sound like it's coming from a different angle. Yeah, the whole term of you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If you spend a lot of time watching the content that is successful, especially in the area that you're working in, you will absorb so much of that consciously and unconsciously. So going back to that, make sure you consume a lot of content, because that's going to help you get better too, because you get to pick up on things and view it as a creator, not just a viewer.
It's interesting you say that, because I did a video recently because everyone, like, there's certain guitarists which people want to play like, right? So I've just picked randomly like 4 of the most sort of iconic players that I get here, people a lot that I work with, they want to play like this guy, they want to play like John Mayer, they want to play like Hendrix or Dave Gilmour or Clapton. And I went through and just did a video analyzing their practice schedules and how they actually develop their skills. And they just spent a ton of time absorbing themselves in the music and trying to reproduce and emulate their heroes by transcribing by ear. Like, that was like 70 to 80% of what they did. That's
incredible. It's like a healthy obsession.
Yeah. And it's like you're saying, just immerse yourself in what you want to be doing. Like, get to know what that looks like, what good content looks like, and then start to try and emulate it. There you go. The secrets, the keys to success, completely free for you wonderful listeners out there.
Mate, that's the theme, isn't it? There are no secrets. It's literally just immersion, hard work, healthy obsession, building skills.
Did you get that out of the book, The Secret?
I did not. I'm such a genius. I came up with it myself.
All right, dude. Well, let's wrap this one up. So where can the good listeners find you?
Just search for Creator Impact. I have creatoриmpact.com. If you look for Creator Impact on all the socials, YouTube especially, Instagram, Facebook, X, Twitter for the boomers, and that's pretty much it.
If you want to check out my works, you can look on hbmguitar.com or on YouTube for @hbmguitar. Don't forget to like and share these episodes to people on Spotify, Apple, whatever platform or YouTube you're listening to, and get in touch if there's any comments or questions anyone's hit with after listening to our episode today. All right, mic drop time, Wade. I guess I
won't actually drop the mic because it'll be like a big horrible noise at the end of the podcast. I don't want to do it to our viewers.
All right, people. Have a good week. Catch you for the next one.
See you next time, guys.